Welcome, 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 and thank you for joining us for another episode of today's Electrical Estimating. I'm Chris Trommer, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sal Huerta.
I'm doing, Chris.
Not too bad. Well, today we got an interesting one, Keith Peck from ElectricSmarts that we're both very familiar with, who is going to be giving us some insight into the NetPricer service. You know, we've had conversations over the last couple years as I've tried to learn more about your side of the business, about the definition of what NetPricer is. You know, some people call it a pricing service, but then there's other companies and other platforms that are out there that consider themselves pricing services, sort of in that similar space. But from our conversations, it seemed like, yes, NetPricer is a pricing service, but they do two different functions. And I think before we start getting in this conversation where Keith is talking about, you know, the benefits of this or why this was created with the NetPricer service, maybe we should give a little bit of a breakout and a definition of, you know, what makes these two different or the understanding of a pricing service itself.
The pricing services, and they've been around, for probably close to 100 years. Way back when the old days where somebody actually put it together on a piece of paper, and these used to be called hot sheets, and send them out to people so that way they would know what the prices are for that week or that month or so forth. So these services have been around a long time. Basically, what a pricing service does is it aggregates data from manufacturers and standardizes it. So your estimating packages or other services that you have as a contractor or even as a distributor, it now has a format that allows you to import all this stuff into your computer systems and then manage and maintain it. There are hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers out there who change their prices 2 or 3 times a year. So you can see that there are price changes all the time. There's items that get deleted or new items, and all these things have to be, put together and then managed, maintained, and then sent to you as the customer. What NetPricer does is like you mentioned earlier, a pricing service, but with a twist. We are providing pricing to the customer, but it's pricing directly from the distributor. So in this case, the contractor who's got his discounts and he has his special pricing all in the distributor's mainframe system. Now what they do through NetPricer is the distributor can now output that directly to a customer and have them have the ability of getting their pricing all the time. One of the major issues that's happened in the past with contracting is waiting for, most of the time, a salesperson to price up this list that they sent them and then get it back to them before the end of a bid day. And that scenario happens all the time, especially in the older days. And that just added much more pressure or so forth to the actual process. With NetPricer, now these guys have access to their pricing 24/7.
So similar, I guess, in theory, they're both providing pricing data information, but on different planes. They're coming through these other companies or platforms, such as, I believe, our partners at Idea. One way where NetPricer, yes, is a pricing service, but is connecting a completely different way that people might not be aware of.
And the price is also going to be different as well. So again, as a pricing service, you can provide a national list price, or the industry calls it a third column price, which is like a very, very high price for them. And then with the old days, what you do is you take discounts off of that to find out what your price is in for your area as far as what everybody else would be pricing things at, and then what your cost price would be, again, discounting off of this list price. When NetPricer changed was that instead of having discounts or factoring things, you now just get a price from your distributor. So if it's an item as a widget, you're not taking 25% off of list price. It's now $1.26. So that price now took it away from being a list price to now it's called an estimate price, a price that's good for you within the marketplace, but yet has your discounts or factors or something built in there as well. So that way you can now have a good price when you're bidding for these estimating jobs.
So the distributor's already building all that into it through whatever formulas they use so that when they look at that number, they're not having to do any math. Everything's built in there with their discounts and rebates and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And that's a big advantage for both distribution and for contracting, because now the distributor, by having that information in there, they're not having to, again, guesstimate what this contractor's pricing at, because he's trying to take these discounts and, again, prices could have changed, or copper could have went up, and then now those discounts don't really apply. Here, they can actually have it already priced out within their mainframe system, and then now the contractor has access through NetPricer.
Well, as always, Sal, you're a wealth of information, and we appreciate your time. Let's jump on into it and hear what Keith has to talk about on this subject. Explain a little bit more, give these people some more details. So, as always, I'll catch up with you next time. Obviously, Sal's here with us, and Sal gave us some insight into his history in the past. And I think, what was it, about 22 years ago you came on board with ElectricSmarts on the NetPack side, Sal?
Absolutely. It's been over over 2 decades I've been with the NetPricer side of here. And, we've been fortunate that the NetPricer has become a well-respected branded name in the electrical industry from the time that we started, again, over 2 decades ago. And at that time, as Keith was mentioning, this was the first 100% cloud-based program in the electrical industry. So this was well before its time. And now the reason I've been saying these couple of little things right now leading up to this is because Keith was the one that invented all this. So, Keith, can you tell us a little bit about how the genesis of how this NetPricer process all began?
Obviously, estimating software was developed, in this time frame, this 24-year time frame. That was huge because, a lot of contractors were doing their estimates in spreadsheets and on paper. And as you might imagine, with large projects, multi-level, commercial, these things get very complicated. The amount of materials and trying to calculate labor on the sixth floor versus the first floor. So that was a milestone. We weren't involved in that, but what we saw was, one of the steps in that process was you had to get material pricing into this quote. Obviously, you're doing, the labor side, but you also need the material side. And that's where we saw the opportunity because, again, that was still in a very much a legacy, slow motion, inefficient type process where I have to get a bunch of products. It could be 500, 1,000 different products with different quantities and get pricing from 2 or 3 distributors. And I'd give that off in a spreadsheet, or I'd fax something to them back in the day. And then I'd have to wait for them to respond. It might take days, might take a week. I'm trying to get these quotes done. And then I get it back and I have to have somebody manually enter it back in. Very slow, very inefficient. There's not an opportunity for the distributor to be sort of selective. He's getting these requests. He's getting inundated with these requests all day long from a bunch of contractors. Obviously the internet being, coming into its own there, we saw the opportunity for that to be, again, connect the dots between a contractor's estimating software and their distributor pricing. So we worked, took years to get these software companies, as Sal well knows, because he was the one tasked with that, to get the estimating vendors who are creating these software programs to build in our NetPricer capability so that we could essentially connect the dots. And then we worked with the distributors. They saw the advantage to be able to respond to pricing requests 24/7, sort of instantaneously, from no matter what software their contractor customer may have been using. So that was really the genesis. The opportunity was how much more efficiency can we bring to the table if a contractor, in the midst of doing his estimate, he's got his material list built and he could just press a button and connect in nanoseconds to 1, 2, 3 of his these are distributors he's already working with, he has a relationship with, but he can get that pricing back in seconds, and it can automatically cross-reference if he's put in materials that 1 or more of his distributors maybe don't carry because of their restricted line card. We could again be helpful in that regard in cross-referencing that to an item that distributor does carry, and essentially be able to deliver that pricing. So that was the genesis of NetPricer. It caught on very quickly because, again, it's the easy button.
Real quick follow up on that one, Keith. You had mentioned that all of this sounds simplistic today, but you touched a little bit on it. This was all during the paper catalog days, and people doing things manually on paper. Did you find a lot of resistance from the estimating companies because of the digital side or the computer side of this? And did they push back, thinking that, well, not enough contractors are computerized or capable of doing this kind of stuff?
Well, I think, obviously it was unproven. So there was, some skepticism. I mean, we had, as a company had been around, but this was a new area for us. But I think really what won them over is, kind of the first in mentality. They saw that, wow, if I build this thing in and I demo this capability, here I got this materialist, watch this, I press a button and all the pricing comes back in seconds. And maybe the other estimating companies don't have it yet. Boy, that's going to give me a competitive advantage. The biggest resistance wasn't there. I would say the biggest resistance was with distributors, because they were afraid that this easy button was going to make it easy to shop around, if you will. Our retort to that was, guess what? When the fax was invented, when the phone was invented, it makes it easier. But the reality was that's not the primary driver for contractors. It's really to, they want to sharpen their pencil so that they can win the bid. So they want to get pricing that's timely and as accurate as possible, not subject to all this re-entering data that, causes issues. And, again, they generally have their relationships with their distributors are already set. Those distributors are giving them credit. They have a sense of confidence, and products are going to show up at the dock when they say they are. So the primary driver was not to drive down pricing. Can you use it for that? Yes, you probably could. But as I say, most of these relationships go beyond just the price of the product. There's a service element, there's a confidence, there's a credit, that's being provided by those distributors. So, eventually that became sort of a non-issue as time went on.
We talked about pushback on the estimating side, and it reminded me of a conversation we had with Cheryl Lynn a little ways back, where we talked about pushback from contractors in adopting estimating software. And she was saying that even then, the people that were so used to using pen and paper to do their takeoffs and everything, still, some of them to this day still do that. I mean, did you guys have a lot of pushback at the time from contractors that were saying, hey, we're just going to stick with what works, we're going to stick with what we're used to? Or were they sort of open to the idea of saving this time and being more efficient? And is that something that's continued on to this day, or is it sort of drowned out over time as people saw the benefits from it?
Well, I think even in those early days, obviously, if theoretically you could have used our service with a spreadsheet, but that's not, for the most part, you had to have an estimating software to make the best use of it. So in their owning and estimating software, the contractor has already shown that, hey, I value technology. It's going to save me time, money. It's going to win me more bids. So again, the contractors, once they saw it and again, any estimating software company that had built our NetPricer tool, and they were demoing it, believe me, because it made such an impression. Once contractors saw that were already using software, they were pretty much on board.
Circling back, though, to some of the items that we just discussed before about the creation of NetPricer and how it came about and the needs that you guys sort of saw, were these needs that were being brought to you from people within the industry, contractors? Were people saying, we need this, somebody needs to make it? Or is it something that you guys saw yourselves and just figured, hey, people might not be seeing that there is an opportunity to make their lives easier, more efficient, more timely, and I think we have the idea and the product that can do that for them?
No, there was a collaboration. I mean, we work closely with estimating software packages already, because again, we had a shared customer base in that, they were obviously selling to contractors. Our discussions with them, we would always do again, you can imagine there was a little bit of the wild, wild west back, when the internet was emerging, and people were starting to say, geez, what can we do with this? It's just so many opportunities. You got to focus on ones that you think, are going to land. Both, contractors who used estimating software and the estimating software vendors themselves, these ideas would come up. So, of course, back then there was 1,000 ideas. So, it was more focusing on the ones we thought we could, put energy into and drive some value and meet a market demand. Whether the demand, they knew it was there or not. We knew if we presented it, it's kind of like Steve Jobs. You didn't know you needed an iPhone till he showed you one, right? So that was kind of our mentality back then. We didn't dream this up out of ice cream and butterflies. We obviously we're plugged in. We're talking to contractors. We're talking to estimating guys, and a lot of these what ifs come up, and we felt we were in the best opportunity, position to do it, because again, we're Switzerland. One estimating company, they could have built one themselves, but then it would be limited just to their environment. So you wouldn't get the distributor engagement. It's really necessary for someone like us that wasn't tied to a single distributor, wasn't tied to a single estimating environment. And, we were the perfect ones to be able to pull something like that off.